Question of the day. I was teasing with the guys when I walked in. I said, I'll need an extra half hour. I'll be running over. And they didn't think it was very funny. I promise we will not run long. I would imagine we're going to run short. So my name's John Box. I work at Microsoft in Developer and Platform Evangelism, or DPE. I am an architect evangelist, and being based in the South myself, you can imagine that being an evangelist comes with certain benefits. Restaurant discounts, those kind of things. So, let's talk about site pinning. How many people have already familiar with site pinning? Just out of curiosity, I got a couple. And who's not familiar with this concept? All right, some of you didn't raise hands, so what does that mean? I'm trying to figure that out. Well, so who's implemented? Let me put it that way. Okay. Well, okay, so fair question. Okay, who's pinned a website? We'll ask it that way. Okay, everybody should have, right? And we'll talk about, well, any site can be pinned. Now, is it having any site pinning implementation? That's another question. We'll go through some of those thoughts. So, but who's actually done implementation for real? Anybody got a public site that's got it out there today? Internal site that's got it out there today? Nice. Test site on your machine that's got pinnable. Got one. All right. Well, great. We got potential here. So I work on a team that pushes new technologies to customers and try to get them to go public with them, and then we do PR around that. And one of our focuses has been on IE9 and site pinning. And so we'll walk through some examples. I'll show you some live sites. Also, we'll code one as we go through to kind of show you just how easy this is. And you should be able to go back and probably do yours in an hour or so. And then we'll talk about some benefits. We're going to talk about also discovery, how to get it registered, some other little gotchas. So this is the basic thing. I really only have about 4 slides, so we're going to be spending a lot of time in Internet Explorer and a little bit of time in Visual Studio today. So I hope that will be welcome news for everybody. Has anybody been bored or been killed by PowerPoint yet this week? Anybody? Nobody. Well, that's good. So I'm glad I will follow that same idea. So when I go in front of customers, and I want to try to take you through a conversation of my pitch to corporate customers that I've been doing, and I've part of a team of 9 folks that are in the middle third of the U.S., what we call Central Region, and it's been pretty interesting to go through these conversations to talk about why. Now, if you look back at IE8, how many people have heard of IE8? Right, only a few of you. Good to know. How many people are familiar with Internet Explorer? Okay, good. I'm just checking. I can't tell where you guys are really coming from here. So, Internet Explorer 8 has some interesting add-ons. You guys have heard of like accelerators? How many people ever put out an accelerator? Nice. All right. How many people used an accelerator? All right. I'm telling you, they're interesting little things. Some people laugh at me and say, that's so IE8, come on. And they're still in there, by the way. IE8 has some nice little features: accelerators, web slices, visual search. They were not well adopted. I don't know why. I think they were pretty cool. And I'm concerned that site pinning may suffer the same kind of deal. I think if you get people's attention, they're pretty engaging. And I've got a few more points along that line, but let me just talk about some of the things that our customers, our partners are telling us. So I mentioned in my session yesterday, if you didn't happen to catch it, that in the IE9 beta launch, The Killers was one of our demos that we did, the music group. So you should go, thekillersmusic.com and check that site out. Not only is it an HTML5 site, it also supports pinning. And they did some instrumentation, some analytics, and what they came to find out was people that came there as pinned consumers, they're more engaging. They stay there longer. They stay twice as long as the unpinned consumer. That's a pretty big deal. I assume some of you guys work at companies where you're selling things, through e-commerce type activities, right? That's going to be a valuable fact for you to leverage if you want to try to do site pinning. Flixster, they're saying people are reading 71% more, Huffington Post, again, another positive fact that people stay longer when they come through a pinning experience. And then High Five has some more interesting facts there about this similar ideal. The more you make your site engaging, we already know this, right? The longer people will stay. You obviously got to have good content, got to have a good business practice. Those things got to go hand in hand. And if you can make a good website, we understand that. But why is site pinning so much better? All right? The deal is it's engaging, and it keeps people connected to your site. So we're going to talk about these fundamental pieces, and this is a pretty thin API. I mean, that's kind of the overlay of the whole thing there. Basically, what is pinning? We're going to look at that in a couple different ways to pin a site. We're going to look at jump list, we're going to look at notifications, and we're going to look at how to do the thumbnail preview. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go away for a long time. We're going to walk through all of these pieces of how to do them and show you some examples as well. Is that good with everybody? So first off, this is my laptop running IE9, obviously. And so one of the things I'd like to start out with talking about is it's pretty important that you have a fave icon, and it's pretty important that you enhance it. Now that seems pretty reasonable, but you'll be surprised how many sites out there don't have a fave icon. All right, you know what I'm talking about? So, as an example, let's just go to the Tech Ed site. Now, this is a pretty popular site today, but what's the problem with it? No fave icon. All right, why is that important? If you pin that site, it's not going to be as visually pleasing, and from a marketing perspective, you're missing a branding opportunity. All right, so if I pin this, and we talk about several different ways to pin, right? How many ways do you think there are to pin a site? I should have like a T-shirt, right, ready to throw it. Who gets this right? How many different ways? 5? Let me think. Maybe. We could argue maybe split a hair. It's close. 5 might be the right answer. So the basic way, what's the typical way you see this done? So most people are going to grab this tab and do that, right, and drop it. All right, so you can also grab this guy over here and do it there. There's also a way to do this through the menu, right? You find the right spot here, so add to the start menu. And there's another thing to think about here as well. So let's pick a site that's got a nice fave icon. And I picked this one because they have a great little fave icon. Let me show you why. Anybody know of a good way to look at someone else's fave icon? Anybody? I just want to make sure that, I mean, yeah, you can browse it, but I really can't see the details of it. And the fave icon is pretty important. Let me see if I can do it this way. So imagine once you have the URL. So what I did, I went to Domino's.com earlier, used my F12 tools, peeked in there, found the icon, found the path. This is like they got it on a CDN. Just going to hit enter and pull it in. So when I do this, several things to note. On the left-hand side, you notice they have 4 different images in there. You don't want just one. Most of you do what size icon? Think about it. 16 by 16, all right? What happens in IE9 when you have a 16 by 16 is we put little frames around it. And it just looks, it lacks a little oomph. So Domino's, they saw what we were doing, and they put the different sizes that we need. And this is the optimal kind of solution. You need 4 different images at a 16 by 16, 24, 32, 64. All right? And the reason that's important, site pinning is all about, if you got to believe that this taskbar is kind of the liquid gold, right? If you can keep someone's attention and they keep your logo on that taskbar, that's good branding for you, and it's there all the time. But you got to initially earn it, and then you got to keep them. First part is make your icon look good. The bigger and bolder it is, the better it's going to look. So let's go back to their site. Now this site does not support pinning, so I'm just going to drag it on there. Notice though, it looks pretty good. The other thing to talk about pinning is what it does to the top right here. There's no IE logo. We are out of the way. This is all about your site at this point. Now also notice your icon, your fave icon is the anchor. The forward and next button, we look at the dominant color there and adapt that as well. The chrome itself, that top border is transparent. So it's all about your content at that point, all right? So now here's the other thing. Let's go to another site. And I'll leave that there. So here's another lesson about pinning is that button is still there. Now this site, they've implemented pinning, delta.com. There's our logo. Now here's what you need to be aware of as well. So I'm still getting icons to download. Now waiting for these images to update here, but you'll notice some of the logos are still coming down. We put these little blank spots there. That's going to refresh as you come to it a couple more times. So it won't stay that way. But notice they've got a menu there. As opposed to, and I'm not picking on Domino's because this is one of my customers I deal with, and they have a really great site. Domino's, they don't have any site pinning capability built in yet, and it's just a very short menu. So today, someone can go to your site and pin it 99, and this is what it's going to do. So at least have your fave icon ready. That'll be important. And if it's a 16 by 16, you're going to get a frame. And it shows up in other places too, right? Like if you go to the new tab, and you'll see some of these like Facebook, there's a Microsoft site. They don't have that frame around it. But other icons do, and that's unfortunate. Not a big deal, just a cosmetic thing. That makes sense so far? Just laying some groundwork down here. Yes, sir. So, no, it should be showing the better one. So I'm not sure exactly why they're doing it. I don't know if it's the that white background they're putting around it as opposed to transparent. But it's a good call. They've got the bigger ones, and we'll take the biggest one we can use based on your resolution of your monitor. And it shows up in multiple places, right? It's going to show up like this 16 is going to show up in here. You see the one with the frame over here, the new tab. So an enhanced fave icon is an important thing. Okay. Now the other thing too, most of the time you see this done to the taskbar, but you can also pin it to the start menu as well. All right, you can let me just unpin these real quick. You don't see many people do this, and I'm not sure I'm a big fan of it, but let's just do one. We'll do Domino's again. And again, I could pin it to the start menu. There's also a JavaScript command to pin to the start menu. So it kind of works like this. I can take the tab, I can drag it here, and I dropped it wrong. Did I get it? No. So you got to drop it on there. And you can do it through the menu as well. But the basic deal is it shows up here, and then the static menu shows up over here. So it's not that exciting. Because the big deal, I think, is you want it in that taskbar. Because you can look at mine. You can see I keep one thing pinned all the time. All right? I got several things there, but I keep one website pinned there all the time. You know which one it is? All right? So, and Facebook, they did a little bit of implementation. They didn't build out everything, but I use it a lot. And there's some features there that I do appreciate from site pinning from them, so I keep it pinned there all the time. So, you know, whenever I pin something else down here, those are important opportunities for those from a marketing perspective. The other thing here to realize when you pin, not that you need to know this, but in case it ever comes up, is, let me do this route. there is a folder out there. You got to turn hidden folders on. But when you pin these, that actually what Internet Explorer does is make a little special shortcut file, and they put it in this hidden folder. You should never have to go look at this, but if you're a nerd and like these extra facts and you need to impress some girl Friday night at a party, you can show her this folder right here. All right, and this is just a shortcut file. You can rename it to a text deal and look at it in Notepad, and it's not going to help you with that girl Friday night, but it'll give you something to talk about instead of just stare. Okay. Let's talk about jump list. Now, what I'm also going to do when we go through this is, everybody know .NET Rocks, the show? You guys familiar with that? So if you go to .netrocks.com, you can see Carl and Richard. They do an audio show every week. It's been going on for years, and I mean years, a long time. And they started up in the early .NET days. I'm going to kind of walk you through we're going to imagine I'm having a conversation with them, and I'm trying to pitch site pinning to them. So just to let you know how I do this with customers. So do I show you the code first, or do I show you the sample? Let's just do this first. So to make sure we all understand what I'm talking about. This is their site, .NET Rocks. Just going to go full screen there. And this is talking about the last shows. You can see a list of the latest shows here. Typical kind of blog style, daily post. They do a post for every show they put out. And it's pretty good. You should, if you want to keep up with stuff, this is a pretty good one from a Microsoft perspective. So if Carl and Richard were here right now, I'm going to walk through my pitch. And that way, hopefully, you can kind of take this same basic idea back with you. So one of the things I've been doing with corporate customers when I start this conversation is really two basic points. One, we're really serious about HTML5, really serious. Hopefully you can tell that this week. If you haven't, let me know, and I'll show you some interesting sites that we've worked with. But check out our Mix keynote, visit mix.com, look at what we did last April. You can look at some interesting demos there. But we're serious about performance, serious about interoperability. But while we're waiting for that big onslaught to come down the path, your short-term win is going to be with site pinning. It's an easy win for you. And hopefully through this presentation you'll see why. The other thing to keep in mind as well, have you seen any public facts of what we talked about with our Windows 7 licensing sales? Because this is important. How big is your potential audience? Site pinning depends on Windows 7. All right, so you should be able to know, look at your site today and go, all right, how much IE8 traffic do I have? How much IE9 traffic do I have? How much of those people are running Windows 7? Because the beauty, the rich capabilities here is IE9 and Windows 7. Even though IE9 runs on Vista, we'll talk about some issues with that later. That makes sense so far? How much Windows 7 have we sold? 350 million licenses in the last year. So when you get all this marketing about what other companies are doing and what they're selling, we got 350 million in that pipeline that's out the door. All right, that's coming on. Corporations are deploying this, consumers are buying it. It's going to be a growing number. And just like with IE8, do you know what the top browser from a worldwide market share is? How many people think it's Firefox? How many people think it's Chrome? How many people think it's IE6? No winners yet. What's that? IE6? Yeah, 12% is way too high. We want to kill it, right? We do too. IE6countdown.com. How about IE7? IE7 the top browser? I got one hand, two hands, three hands. If you raise your hand on any of those questions so far, you're wrong. Top browser is IE8. We did it in a year. All right, so go back and check your reports, check your analytics, make sure I'm right. But I want to sit down with corporate customers. I can walk through and I can pick off the list because I know where they are. And you can go look too. You go to these sites like Quantcast or Alexa. They'll let you put in your site and they'll estimate what your numbers are. And you'll see most of the time IE8's the top one, IE7 is the next one, and then we jump way down. We're going to see Firefox, Chrome, IE6. The other thing you have to think about is the desktop breakdown. That's another interesting dynamic. But all right, so if I'm going in front of a customer, what I'm saying is, hey, IE9 might not be big to you today. You may not see Windows 7's getting on pretty strong. You got to realize what's coming down the path if you're doing a public-facing site. I'm doing lunch bets with my customers that IE9 will be the biggest, their top share browser by the end of the calendar year. So that's not Microsoft saying that. That's John Box, individual employee, making a bet. All right, so just kind of giving you a little background there, what else you need to think about. So if I'm going to go to Carl and Richard here, this is their site. And what I do when I go to corporations, I copy their site. So what I'm doing, notice this is localhost/DNR. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Because it's their HTML. I'm still pulling their resources and stuff, but it's their live page. So what I've already done is started adding pinning to this. I'm going to show you the code, each piece I added, and I'll show you some other live sites as well. So let me come back to that. I don't want to give it away yet. Has anybody pinned on their machine yet? Do you have a favorite site that you pinned already? What's good, Westy? What do you got? Twitter? All right, so has anybody pinned Twitter? Is he the only one? There's a bunch of good ones out there. So, oops. Really? Does it support it? Okay, so you pinned it just to use it as a favorite, but it doesn't have any pinning capability in it. Okay. On a lot of sites are going to be that way, but they're missing out on an opportunity. So can I do it unauthenticated? Can I do Twitter unauthenticated? I'm going to try. No, I'm just going to do it. You think I should? Well, I'm sure I do, but all right. I'm not going to guess. Now, there was the lifetime of pinning for some brand right there. I pinned it, didn't do what I wanted it to do, I'm out. So got to think about that. You got one chance to impress them with that menu, all right? And I'm sure, obviously Twitter's huge. Other sites. Gonna pin it. Aha. They've got things waiting for me right there. All right, so there's several sites that are doing this. And the other thing to point out here is, again, look at the forward and next buttons. No IE logos. How much code does it take to do that right there? What do you think? So you get the coloring and all of that for 0 lines of code. Right? Now, the next part, those tasks, take a few more lines of code, about 5 lines for that menu plus 3 more for the installation. So let me show you this from a .NET Rocks perspective. I'm going to unpin these because they'll drive me crazy. I just don't like a lot of clutter. Until you see my desktop, then you go, what the heck are you talking about? So we're going to pin these guys. Now the other thing, I'm glad they're not here because I wouldn't want to make them mad or anything, but they didn't have a fave icon. So I had to go make one. And I just threw it together, so it's not very pretty. But it's supposed to be that little microphone. I'm going to pin this. And so the first thing I would show them was, hey, there's the microphone. I added a fave icon for you. And realize about the icon. In IE9, we enforce it's got to be a true icon. You can't fake it with a bitmap. It's got to be the icon container. You know what I mean? A lot of people aren't aware of that. They just throw some bitmap or PNG out there and expect it to be their fave icon because they named it faveicon.ico. Doesn't work anymore. It's got to be a real thing. All right. So now that I pinned it, you can see that we've got some color, the proper things going on here. And the first thing I did was I've added some menus. And I just looked across their menu. All right. So now I'm standing in front of them going, this is how it would work. I might show them some other sites. Now I'm showing them their site. So this is something you can do because you might spend a couple hours to be able to show your business owner of your website, or how many people are doing consulting in here? This is a perfect opportunity for you. You could probably even add it to an existing site on your time and impress your customer that you did this. So These are static jump lists in this section here, in this task section. These are the kind of items that you would show for all users across the site. And we'll talk about the difference between static and dynamic, but static, really easy to implement. Now, how does this work when you click on one of these? And these are all different domains, right? So if I went to Twitter or this store, they have it in a different domain. And you'll notice it fires up a separate tab, and these are live links. And when we do, it still keeps all of this home stuff, these anchors in place, the colors and all that, because we're still in their pinned site experience. This website is starting to appear like it's a Windows app. That's one of the basic ideas here. It's like a Windows app. Now, the other thing I did too, I could go through all sorts of things, but this fifth one is just my own little selfish thing I did. Show 56. That's me a long time ago in the top there, back when I didn't have gray hair and I was a little thinner. So show 56, and what number are they on today? So it's interesting, that numbering is getting kind of interesting there. I think they have a special show coming up. I won't ruin that surprise, but it's just interesting with all the predictions of, the end of time and all that, so great timing for that. So now, I'm sitting in front of Carl and Richard. I've shown them the static jump list just to get them started. Now let's step back and let me show you how I did this, right? Really simple to do. A couple different things here. And hopefully you can see that top section. Now this top section is what I call the install parameters or the install time entries. You need to take these entries and you put them on every page in the site. Now, some people take that section below, which is the actual menu items, and they put that on every page. You don't have to do that. You can put the bulk of your definition on one page. You just need the start URL, that third line, is the important one. It points to where the definitions are. Now what this also does, when you pin any pages that have this on there, it closes the browser and opens up a new one, wherever that start URL points to. So keep that in mind. All right, so top section goes on every page in the site. Bottom section, that static menu, only has to be here. All right, this is a very typical pattern. There are other patterns you could do, but this is a very simple, typical pattern. So let's just walk through them real quick. The application name and the application tooltip are just the pieces that are Windows 7 taskbar kind of capabilities. Like when you highlight the app and you get these little tool tips that show up, like .NET Rocks, that's all built in there, right? Now then, there are other things that you could put in here, and I'm just showing you one of them. You can tell it the size of the window, so that it's not full screen. You can tell exactly what size you want. You can do that. The other thing I did here, I can override the button colors. So let me do it. Uncommented that, right? Control K, Control U. How many people use Visual Studio in here? Good. So you can highlight something and uncomment it with a Control K, Control C. Let me save that. Do a refresh here. Now notice it's a slight different color change right there. That little entry that I just changed, in case you don't like the color, the default color that the IE algorithm used, you can override that. So I haven't seen the color choices be too bad, but if you have an icon that the dominant color is black, for me personally, I don't like the black buttons there. It just looks kind of weird. So I override it and brighten it up. So this is fine. That's how simple that was to do. But this is all that it takes to get a jump list going. So really, 3 lines required, 4 if you want to start making it work with a certain color set. And then the static jump list itself. Now, also, the static jump list, you have a limit of 5 items. That's all you got. Can't go any bigger with a static list. All right, any questions with this? Pretty simple, isn't it? Now, inside of this, it's semicolon delimited. You have 3 fields. You have the menu text, and then you have the thing that you want to jump to, the URL you want to jump to, and then the last section is the URI to the icon, because you put icons by each entry. entry. You can do things like use the favicon over and over again, but if you'll make it more visually relevant, your eyes process images faster than they process text. So a nice image comes in handy there. And those have to be 16 by 16. You can make bigger, and sometimes Microsoft or the IE9 will break it down and kind of scale it down for you. But typically 16 by 16 is what you're working with. So that's it. That's all there is to making a static jump list. Most site pinning implementations today, this is all that's in there, right? Because it's easy to drop stuff into the head element, save it, and you're in. You're done. But I think that's not good enough. You're not going to really keep a consumer very long. You can make it a lot more engaging. Yes, sir?
If you wanted to have different sections of your site that have different,
Yep.
change that.
Great question. So the question is, can I have multiple jump lists based on the section of the site that I'm in? Or different jump lists based on the site I'm in? Yeah, absolutely. So you can have, basically that start URL is the important piece there. So Huffington Post. Anybody know Huffington Post? Go to HuffingtonPost.com. They support that same exact pattern. Depending on where you pin in their site, you get pointed to the menu that's appropriate for that part of the site. So think like weather versus sports. Great question. Okay. I could show other examples here. I don't know how far you want to see these. Pizza Hut was another one that we've worked with. Orbitz. WordPress. Anybody got a WordPress blog? Anybody got a friend that has a WordPress blog? Site pinning's built into their blog and they don't even know it. So you should show it to them. I had someone say, hey, can you help me with pinning? I really liked your talk. And he had a WordPress blog. It's like, you're already pinnable. You're good. So keep that in mind. One more thing, there's a couple little gotchas I want to point out here. This start URL feature, you'll notice that I've got a trailing slash there. This is really important. I don't know why it's so important, but I've had a couple of corporations actually deploy the site pinning, and their menu wouldn't appear at all. And that trailing slash is important. Now, you can actually put a full URL to your home page, but it's got to be the full path to it. And when it does, it gets the trailing slash to that path that it needs. Don't understand why, but that's the way it is. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, I had a customer who had a URL that had semicolons in it. And so you can see this field here. This field is semicolon delimited. So when they had semicolons in their URL, that was a problem. So they just needed to percent them out, and then it worked just fine. Like what is it, %3B or something like that, I think. So keep that in mind. Just a couple of gotchas wanted you to be aware of. Have I killed anybody yet? Anybody asleep yet? I'm doing all right? Good. Anybody learned anything yet? Anybody not learned anything yet? Just checking. Wow, all right. So everybody's learned one good thing. That's good. So it hadn't been a waste of an hour yet, has it? Great. So now, we talked about static jump lists. So let's talk about dynamic. Anybody have good dynamic jump list samples out there you want to mention? So here's a pretty big name. Amazon as well is in there. But you can pin these. They've got a nice looking logo in there, right? And so what they're doing is they've got, you see the bottom section, the static task, and then the top section is the dynamic jump list. So static jump list versus a dynamic jump list. The dynamic jump list is done with JavaScript. So it takes a little more effort on your part to add these. All right, and then you get into a thing of how big can the list be, and also the ordering is interesting because in the static jump list, you put it in the order you want. The dynamic, you have to do it in reverse. This supports the ability for you to do a batch entry all in one shot when it's pinned, or an incremental addition, an additive approach over time. So that's why they do that. The max to show at a time is 10. The stack is actually will hold 20. And as they roll off the back, they expire. They get deleted. So you can keep adding and adding and adding. and the oldest ones in the list will roll off. You can re-add the same item, and it'll just move it up the list and keep it. And as they expire, there's an event that you can put in there if you want to know about expiring items. So if you want to capture those. And we'll also talk about the way to create that text on top, where it says daily deal. And we'll look at code samples. So just throwing a few facts out there for you to keep in mind. And there's some really good ones out there, eBay, Amazon, Groupon. I mean, just a lot of good ones. So let me go back to the Carl conversation here, the .NET Rocks conversation. I'm going to click this, and so when I'm showing a corporate customer dynamic jump list, you only have one menu, right? The problem I've run into, when you have to sell this to someone, you show them one menu, they only think that's the only way to do dynamic jump list, right? So you want to be able to swap, in my opinion. And let me show you how I do this. So right now, currently, I only have the static jump list, right? What I do is I go into the page and I take some of the images they wouldn't expect and I put JavaScript behind them. So this little piece right here, I've got some JavaScript right there. Now it's not going to click or go crazy or nothing like that. I'm going to click right here. I just clicked. You didn't see anything, right? But I'm talking to the customer and saying, well, imagine if you could dynamically create and update this menu. So when I go back down here now, you'll notice that I've taken this jump list. So the static list was limited to 5. The typical first scenario I show a customer is how to extend that limit of 5 by using the dynamic jump list to make it a little taller. And I could add up to 10 things. Notice I put .NET Rocks, but sometimes I put like a marketing, they have a slogan or something like that. I'll put that there in that header text. But that's pretty straightforward. And these are all live links. Give a shout out to my mentor, Billy Hollis, out of Nashville, Tennessee, the RD out of Nashville. But this also is an opportunity for, you'll notice on the right-hand side that these guys are doing advertising with Telerik. This is an opportunity now to go back to their sponsor and say, hey, by the way, we're putting you in our jump list menu. In theory, it could be a revenue opportunity for you that way. So something else to keep in mind. And there's another conversation we'll have at the end about analytics, instrumentation. If you need to track some things, some of those are a little bit tougher to do when it's in this menu like this, but there are some ways to do it. So keep that in mind. That'll be important to you if you're thinking from that perspective. So now, I can show you a lot of different samples of how this is done. Like eBay and Amazon both have dynamic jump list. What could you apply dynamic jump list for? Anything from live updates to the last thing they browsed. You can put those items back in there. All sorts of stuff. A newspaper could have latest articles viewed. An e-commerce site could have the last items viewed, all that. Yes, sir? It's your JavaScript. It's executed when you execute it. So what I would look for is, if you have any kind of like Ajax background style stuff going on, you would sprinkle these JavaScript calls into that, so it's real time. Yes, so the question is, does IE have to be open? Absolutely. It's not an offline kind of thing. Great question. Yes, sir?
Can the JavaScript interact with the open window right there? So let's say, for example, you had Twitter open. Could it be updating with Twitter feeds, tweets as they...
So you could, this page could update that menu list on the fly while it's open. That's a great question. I'm not sure if it would update while it's open. It may have to close it and open it back, but it definitely could update it. I don't know if it would show you the visual change.
Like that Telerik line there, instead of just being a Telerik line by itself, could the JavaScript be doing something to...
Yeah, so I don't know how to, let's talk about that afterwards and see if I can test that out for you. Right now, I've got mine tied to a click on that page. So I can't prove it out, and I don't know the answer. So it's a good question. Can it update that menu while the menu's open? I want to say no, but I don't know for sure. Good question. All right, so that was the first jump list. This is a scenario where I extend it. Yes, sir? You cannot update the static jump list. So the question is, can you update the static jump list from JavaScript? Right. The static jump lists are only the meta elements, can only be updated by refreshing those elements. But they are updatable when they come back to the page and the elements are different, they will update, yes. And then the dynamic jump list itself, obviously, run the JavaScript again and you can update that list. There's also a reset command, and I'll show you that here in a second, how to do that. So let me show you a couple more about this conversation. So scenario number one in front of the customer, I'm extending the static list of 5, so I'm extending it to add other items. I call it the extending pattern, so nothing fancy there. So now, what about you want to do something a little more creative than that? And so I'm talking to the customer, and while hopefully I'm going, hey, shiny things, he's not looking around. I'm clicking on the second item here. And so now I click back down here. I've given them, using the 10 things, these are the last 10 shows for .NET Rocks. All right? And if I had more time, I would also add an item in there that shows kind of an empty menu item that basically says when was the last time this menu was refreshed. And that way, when they go away from the site and they don't have IE open and they happen to right-click just to say, I haven't been there in a long time, they can go, wow, it's been 2 or 3 days. I need to go back and make sure I know the latest list. Because this is not an offline updatable technology like web slices were. That's why web slices were cool. And you all missed out on it. Web slices are still in there if you want to do it. All right. That was scenario number 2. Let me do the scenario number 3. They're very simple. I just clicked on that third item there. And it's the same idea, except for showing titles, I'm showing interviewed guest names. Now, I could do all sorts of stuff. I could go through and find other things, like they have comments on each page. I could show the latest comments. I could show the latest tweets and even update that on the fly. There's a lot of different things you can do here to make this dynamic. The trick is, the more dynamic you make it, you're going to keep someone glued to your site for a lot longer, right? The question is then, how would you let them know that updates have occurred to get them to come back and actually view your page? Because how many times do you sit there and just stare at one page, right? Usually you're off doing other stuff, email, browsing another site, talking to your neighbor or whatever. There's some ways to get their attention and bring them back. Does this make sense, dynamic jump list? Hopefully your wheels are spinning how you can apply this. Let's take a peek at how we did it. Now this is a very simple thing that I do. I just put a function in there. And I've got my function inline here, so call the police. This is not the right way to do it. Not the best way to do it, put it that way. So this is the basic function I want to show you. So the first thing is, there's a function called ms is site mode. This basically means, are they pinned? Because you don't want to be messing around with their menu or trying to update their menu if they're not pinned. Okay? So that's important to do. The next thing I do is I can reset the jump list. Now, I mentioned earlier, I talked about like batch versus incremental update strategies. Batch means I'm going to do the whole thing in one shot like this. Incremental means you're going to add them over time. So you don't want to reset the list like this. So the next thing I do, remember I had different scenarios? So these are my different scenarios. First thing I'm doing is I've got to create the jump list. I can't add items to a jump list until I call a create. Doesn't matter what I call the create, but I can't add until I call create and give it a header text. And it's up to you what you want to put in here. That header is under your control. There is a text limit, and I can't remember what it is, but it's not sizable. It's not like you're going to go over across half the page. And then, just like the static jump list, very simple to add a jump list item. So you call add jump list item, and then it's the same 3 things you were doing before. The menu text, the URL that you want to jump to, and then the icon that you want to show. Pretty simple, right? So it doesn't take much more effort to add a dynamic jump list. Now, the other important feature to note here is at the bottom. You can update your jump list, but it won't show immediately until they leave the site, close the site, and come back. So this show jump list says, hey, update this list immediately. So that's why I have that in there. So think about what's involved to make a dynamic jump list. You got 1 call to create, 1 to add, 1 to reset, 1 to show it. That's it for that API. Pretty simple. Pretty simple stuff. Everybody knows how to debug, right, with IE9? Because you were at my talk yesterday, right? F12, do like your IE or your Visual Studio style of breakpoints, you're in great shape. Now then, let's keep going. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. You'll notice whenever I click on one of these items, ooh, I just pinned it, that was great. That's another feature, you can pin things as well. But I'm going to click on one of these, and it fires up a second tab, right? If I kept going, it adds additional tabs. Imagine if you had an audio player or a video player experience going on, and you don't want to necessarily just keep adding tabs, you kind of want to keep them on that front page. There's a way to not open a new tab, and you just use an anchor tag in URL. And it's documented, but I don't see a lot of people using it yet. But it'll basically, instead of doing a post back to the server, it just does a post into the current page, and you just react to the anchor value. So in-place navigation, all right? So keep that in mind if you ever need it. It's in the API. It's just another parameter, and use the anchor value in the URL. Okay, so I kind of alluded to the issue of what happens, how do you keep their attention? Because this is important, a couple of different things here. So one of the best examples of this is Facebook. This is my actual Facebook page. Let me close this. And what you'll notice is I've got some things waiting for me. All right, someone's asking me to be their friend. I've got some news I need to pay attention to. But let's just say that I wasn't paying attention and I was off doing other stuff. How does Facebook cue me to come back to them because there's something to react to? Can you see anything there that will help you out? The overlay icon. All right, you see an asterisk down there on their logo, and it's just one line of code to do that. It's one line of code to remove it. Really simple. So you should brainstorm how you could apply this because it's really straightforward. Now another thing we could do, there's a command to make that logo down there flash. Does a little glowing thing. So if they're not on the current site, you can actually make it flash until they come back to it. So keep that in mind. I'll show you an example of that. And you obviously don't want to abuse that. But if you have compelling content and compelling purpose to why you're doing it, they will appreciate that you did it. If you abuse it, obviously, they're going to unpin you and move on. But if you use it in the right way, it's actually, from a marketing perspective, it's a powerful capability and one that they will be appreciative of as long as you deliver the right kind of opportunity for them. So let me show you how this works. So now I'm going to minimize this, and let's keep our eyes on this. So like I said, imagine you're off doing other stuff. And let's say that I told you they have comments, the ability to post comments, or I could have changed the scenario and say also, well, what if tweets came in? So you'll notice now, I put a timer in there for about 15 seconds so I could talk my way into the scenarios. And then I'm showing, hey, look what's going on here. Now I put a number on there. If you can't see that, it's a number 3. You can put whatever you want, like Facebook did the asterisk. You could put an alarm bell like Outlook does for notification that you need to react to from a time perspective. This 3, you could use it for whatever scenario you wanted to. I could say, well, it's the number of tweets that you haven't read, or the number of messages that have happened since you weren't paying attention, or it's 3 minutes from now, the next session will start. You could use it for whatever. And you have control over what icons you put on there. Again, 16 by 16 on top of that one. So 2 different things, the overlay icon and then making it flash, 2 different JavaScript commands. Let me show you these real quick. So, and I guess you probably want to stop seeing that, right? So here's the code to do this. I clicked on a secret spot again that called this code and basically said, hey, call this again, passing a different number in 15 seconds. And then here's the important part. I told it, this is the path to the icon. This is the function, right? Set icon overlay. You can give it a description. And this is a full URL. Since this is kind of a relative URL because the icon's here. You can actually point to URLs at other sites, or other icons on other sites. You definitely can use those. All right? You're also taking a dependency on that site when you do it, but it's there. And then this is the function that makes it flash. Now, when I first started playing with this function, I couldn't get it to flash. And I'm sitting there copying and pasting the code and it's not doing it. Well, one key essential fact that you have to keep in mind, if the browser is already active, it's not going to flash. If it's the active application with focus. So you notice when I started the conversation, I minimized the page immediately and then started talking about the scenario. That's why. That makes sense to everybody? Banging my head. I emailed one of the PMs going, hey, this function don't work. And he nicely pointed out my ignorance. Now, the other thing about these overlay icons, I don't have any code to remove it, so it's going to stay there until I close it. What you would do is you would have some kind of feature to remove it. If you close this page, as soon as I close it, notice what it did. It took it away. So there's some responsibility on your part to take it away, but you don't have to. You could do something on the page unload if you wanted to, something like that. But it will go away on its own. So, notification. Be responsible. Don't go too crazy. But it's good stuff. Easy to do, too, right? All right. Now, let's keep going with the next sample here. I want to talk about the ability of the thumbnail preview. Now, in Windows 7, you know when you put your mouse over one of these taskbar buttons, that running application, and let me do this one as well, the running application will show, all right? It's a preview capability. It shows you the live app. Everybody running Windows 7 in here? Good, most of you are. The rest of you hope you will commit to that. As a good stockholder, me and my family appreciate it if you went and bought a copy of the Windows 7 today. This is a nice little feature because when you're doing a lot of things, it's very easy to just kind of peek back and see what's going on with that other app because we're in a multitasking world, right? And you don't have to be on every app to look at it. Sometimes you just need a peek at what's going on. So one of the things that we've done, let me just show you one of the examples here. The Huffington Post does this as well. I brought them up earlier. I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag and drop them. And there's their logo. And I hope I can find something positive to look at here. Well, okay. I'm taking a chance. I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, so what they're doing with this page, and I'm pinned, right? You can tell I'm pinned to Huffington because of the logo and the coloring. If I right-click, you can see all of that capability. They've done a static jump list, and they've got the latest items, the top news. Lots of good, positive stuff going on there. Now, also notice when I highlight the Huffington Post icon, they've got two buttons down in the preview window. You can see the Facebook and the Twitter logos. Now, what they're doing there is I can click on one of those to promote this particular article and make a comment about it. Interesting example. Most examples I see deal with video and audio control. All right, pause, play, that kind of thing. Because think about how many times you want to watch a movie or you're listening to some presentation and the boss is walking down the hall and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I got to find that app because I was like listening to it and then I got to mute it or you got to hit the mute button on your computer. It'd be nice to have the ability to hit one of those buttons really quick and not have to go find the app and open it up and all that. So it takes advantage of this Windows 7 preview capability. Now, to do this, well, let me go back to Richard and Carl just for a second and do that demo. So I'm going to close this guy. I'm going to unpin these. Let's go back to .NET Rocks. So you'll notice on their page that they show like the last two sessions. I could actually go to my jump list here and see a list of all of them. If I click on Show Archives, it shows the entire list. And each list, you can play the audio back right there. They actually use a Silverlight player. And this is another thing to point out. Some people think if you have Flash or Silverlight, you can't interact with Site Pinning API, which is totally messed up, right? That's not the right thinking. Because both those technologies have the HTML bridging capability. Your JavaScript can talk to that Flash or Silverlight player. And that player can also push events back out to you that you can receive via your JavaScript code. That code can interact with the Windows 7 taskbar through our API. So I could have wired this up all the way. I didn't do it to interact with their Flash. There's just a picture of their player I put there as an image tag. But what I did do was when I click on this, like I was going to play it, you'll notice I've added now a little play button. Okay, so, and I put some code in there so I can toggle it. And I could have, obviously, as many buttons as that width of that window. You could put more there. But I've just got a little play, and I can pause it, so on and so forth. And if I had that wired up into that Flash player, or the Silverlight player in this case, it would all be wired up for real and will work just like you would expect it to. Very easy code to make that happen. What do you think? Is that interesting? You could use it for all sorts of stuff. I'm going offline, you know, all the regular audio and video things you want to do. You could do things like update your status or update like Huffington Post with their capability of re-promoting or promoting that article. Let's look at the code real quick just to show you how simple this is. So the first thing is I had one of my secret clicks in there. You wouldn't do the secret click, right? You'd put it in some real place to start this. But basically you have to install the button. So the first thing you do is, when you know they're going to go to that mode, you're going to install this button with a site mode add thumb bar button call. You're going to tell it the path to your icon. You're going to give it a description as well. And then this next code is a little interesting. If you went to my talk yesterday, we talked about standards modes. IE9 has different standards modes. And that's, you know, we had some legacy baggage in this little function here. We also have some new stuff. So this is looking at what standards mode you're in. We know you're IE9 because it's Site Pinning API, but we have to know which of the listener or registration events for you support. So we're doing feature detection to make sure we're looking at the right one and using the right registration. But you'll notice they're both, you know, basically registering for the MS thumbnail click. And they're saying, hey, if that event happens, we want to go to the on button clicked event. We'll look at that in a second. But you got to register a listener. The other thing I'm doing here is registering a style. Remember when I clicked on the play button, it toggled and showed the pause? When I clicked on that, it flipped back and forth. This toggling is a style capability. And so this function to do this, the first style will be the default button that I registered. And then I'm registering a second button icon, in this case the pause, and telling it which button I want to associate it with. And when I tell it, hey, swap styles, and I give it the number, that style pause is a number, it'll swap it. And you can have multiple styles for a button, depending on what state you need to represent for whatever scenario you're trying to do. And then you'll notice the last thing here after that is to tell it to show the thumb bar. Now, the next piece here is I told it if someone clicks that button, what event to call. So I also have to track a button ID, and I've already done that. So I know when they click on it, and I don't have all these wired up. I could do previous and next. And I almost started to say, well, what would happen if I wanted to go to the next .NET Rock show? I could have done that. But this is just a play, all right? And I called a separate function just to keep my code separate. So let's look at play pause real quick. This section here in play pause would be if I wanted, you know, if I need to interact with that player, right, the actual container. In this case, it would have been the Silverlight player. I would have, you know, called some JavaScript to pass an event into it to tell it to pause or whatever, or start playing again. Then this is the important piece. First, I check to see I'm pinned. I am pinned. I check to see am I playing or not. And all I'm doing is saying, hey, if I'm playing, I know that I want to show the pause button. If I'm paused, I know I want to show the play button. So I check to see what the current style what the new style is going to be, and then I call this show button style, tell it what button and the new style. That's it. That's the important piece, is that last one. So you install your button, you register for events, and you tell it to show it. Then I've got a button listener, a click event, and I do what I need to do there and call this show button style to flip the style based on the mode that I need to show on that button. That's all there is to that. So you saw what happened when I clicked on it, pretty straightforward, still doing it. And that button will stay there until you turn off that button or until I leave the site. Yes, sir?
Is that independent of whether the site's pinned or not?
It is dependent on the site being pinned.
It has to be pinned to get the button.
Yes, sir. And a lot of people ask that question, and the IT team's looking at that because some of these things are really, they really make sense to do outside of a pinned experience.
Also, is there any visual notification on the page that says, that I can put on there that says I have the pinning capability?
Yes, great question. Coming up here in a minute. I call that discovery. And I mean, we can jump into that right now. Let me flip back just to be a nice presenter, show you where we're at here. So we actually walked through one slide. I've got about 5 more to go, so just a couple more hours. And no, I'm kidding. So this is the other page. These are other things I wanted you to think about. I threw some other customer logos on there, and we'll walk through all of these things quickly. So let me talk about analytics. When you do this, it's going to be important to think about how to measure. Some things are very easily measured. Some of these things are not very easily measured. Imagine if you had a consumer pins your site, but they're still learning about this. They go back to their old browser, type in the regular address, and they're not in your pinned browser, just in an unpinned experience. They go back to your site, but you want them to be using what they've already pinned. They've got it in the taskbar, but they're not catching on. They need to come back and use that taskbar button to start their pinned experience. How would you stop that? Cookie? Cookie might be an option. So there's some things like that. There's kind of a couple things around education and measuring how this is taking off. Because if you tried web slices and you didn't believe in those, you want to measure on this one because it's still in the early adoption phase. I think it's cool, but I thought web slices were too. So get ready to measure. And if you do measure and you have a great story, let me know. I'll give you my contact information. There might be an opportunity for you to get some PR later. We're looking for good stories for adoption. If you have a bad story, let us know that too. We want the feedback. So, discovery. And you just asked a good question, sir. If I had a T-shirt going to you. Discovery is important for a couple of reasons. Let me just kind of look at this. So here, let's go to an unpinned site. Let's do that. I'm sorry? Oh, thank you for that. What would be a good unpinned site that we could do? Well, let's just do this one. Let's do, let's see. Let me give a shout out to Pizza Hut. This is one of our pinned partners. Now, when you look at that site, nothing there is going to let you know. Right? I wish, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this later, but I have complained or asked, why not look at, you've got other things up in that Chrome already, this little section right here up here. Why not add another little icon and say, hey, I noticed there's some pinning stuff on here. That way the user can know it really quick. But they were so sensitive based on their studies where people wanted IE to be out of the way, Microsoft to be out of the way. That is all you control up there. So that's not going to happen today. Maybe they'll add it back in the future. But let me show you what you can do. There's some really good examples out here. So Delta, do you see the red banner on top? Delta said, oh, this is an IE9 user, and they're not pinned. Push this little top hat message to them. And it basically tells them how to start the pinning experience. You guys know of any others? No, that would that teach their consumers how to do this. There's not a lot of them out there. This is something you're going to have to deal with, especially if you're in a public-facing site. If you're an internal site, you can teach your consumers pretty easily, right? Yes, sir.
So let's say I go to Delta and I pin the site.
Yeah.
When I open it up as like a pinned site, will that message still be there?
It'll go away because they got a little check that says if MS site mode. So you're going to use that function a lot when you're doing this because you want to know, what scenario you're in. So look what weather.com, the Weather Channel, and the bottom left here. This is how they chose to educate their users. Okay? You can do this any way you want to. Do it what's right for your business scenario. But if you don't tell your consumers that you have it, how are they going to know? Because plenty of people are not going to tell them. Look at all the samples I've showed you today. Only Delta, Groupon did at one time, and then what was the other one I showed you? Huffington Post did at one time. These are the ones that I know. So it's an issue. Discovery is an issue you're going to have to deal with. Now, here's a different one. Now, I asked you earlier, how many different ways were there to pin a site? We talked about pin to taskbar. Now, you won't see this one. This is a different way. We talked about, especially user-initiated, right? You can pin from I can grab the tab. I can grab the fave icon on the left. I can drop it on the taskbar. I can drop it on the start menu. There's one JavaScript option for installing on the start menu. This is the other way. This is the second way. If you have an image tag, and this is hard to see, but in the bottom right, do you see the little message there, drag to pin? You can put an image tag, and if you put MS Pin Site as the class, then what that does to that image, it looks at your fave icon. Now, they've done a nice little visual effect there. But as I drag this, it will look at your fave icon and throw that in there, and I can drag this on the taskbar. So that's your other option. Now, they put a message in there that says drag to pin. They also did some effects here. Notice how the mouse changes when I hover over it. They put a message on it as a tooltip, and then I can do what I need to do here. And several people do that kind of item as well. But that one's subtle. It's not bold. Sometimes you want subtle. But here's the deal. If you've got value waiting for that consumer, you want to educate them. And what I think you're going to find out later is your most valuable consumer you're going to have is going to be an IE9 Windows 7 consumer that you get to pin. I could be wrong on that, but once you get them, they'll be easier to talk to than any of your other consumers based on the capabilities we've just seen. That makes sense? Now, a couple other things I want to point out here. Now, this is an important function for a couple of reasons, this is site mode function. So first off, IE9 can run on Windows Vista. Windows Vista consumer running IE9 will hit this line of code and work appropriately. But be aware, Vista's IE9 or site pinning capability is different. They don't get jump list. They don't get the taskbar flashing overlay icons. They don't get any of that. So be careful of that. You may or may not want to expose this. If they do pin, they have to pin to their quick launch area, and then they get the Chrome effects on top. They do get that, but they don't get anything else. So somebody in IE is probably going to yell at me for saying that, but I want you to be aware of it. It may not be a big deal since Vista is, most Vista users out there, a lot of them are going to Windows 7 pretty quick. So it might not be a big deal. The other thing is, anybody know the term feature detection? So this is where you do an if to check on a certain feature being available, so you don't have to do a lot of conditional checks, ifs, comments, whatever you want to call them. sniffing for browsers. So this function was intended to be that. All right, so if it supports site pinning, you can use this. A non-IE9 browser, when it hits that line of code, what's it going to do? In this case, it's going to throw an exception. So be aware of that, and you'll notice whenever I use this function, I've got it in a try catch. And when it hits the catch, it's most likely competitive browser, all right, or legacy browser, or it's not IE9. So be aware of that. You'll have to use that. And there's some other patterns you could use too. Jennifer Marsman has a series right now where she showed a different way of doing this, where you can use the type of function check. So keep in mind that issue. Now, one more thing I want to promote. Got some extended teammates that have built something called IE9ify. They just recently renamed it. They've got it on CodePlex. This is a jQuery plugin that helps with some of the coding. And it's got a discovery mechanism built into it to help you with that top hat. It also has, if I post on here, Clark Sell and Brandon Satram. And if you saw the HTML5 session 2 days ago, Brandon is the one who did that. A really good session, by the way. You should check it out. But you'll notice he's got, here's one of his drag deals right here. This is coming out of his jQuery plugin. And if you scroll down here, you'll see some of the samples they've done. Like here's one. And this is basically adding a static jump list. This is showing you how to add jQuery, but it is a jQuery plugin. Here's adding the teaser, he calls it. So take a look at that. I highly recommend it. It was recently renamed to, what was it, Pinify? Pinify. So, and there's other people are starting to take some dependencies on this. I think it'll be an interesting plugin to see how it gets leveraged. So, how many people are doing jQuery in here? So you might want to take a peek at this just to see if that helps out. So, how about this? I almost filled up the whole time, didn't I? How about that? With 2 minutes to go. So, just a quick refresh. I think IE9 PIN consumers are going to be your most valuable purchaser, or whatever your business model is. They're easy to get to. If you can retain them with the right content, they're going to be very easy for you to engage and get their attention and put things in front of. Is it low effort? What do you think? Pretty thin API. The steps. Number 1, start with a good icon. The first thing is make sure it's got the right images in it. All right? You're going to have the multiple sizes in there. Think about dynamic experiences. Don't just do a static jump list. That's good. That's a quick way to go. Start there, but you can go further with that. Use the taskbar to engage that consumer. And then the other issue is discovery. You're going to have to educate them. You're going to have to tell them that you have it, and then you're going to have to keep them and try to prevent them from going their old ways. To use that, depend on that taskbar because it's their friend, all right? So that's it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you learned something. Thanks for coming by the last session of the week, and good luck to you. If you need any help on site pinning, go to my blog. I've got several resources here. Obviously, MSDN has a lot, but go to my blog, contact me, and let me tell you about one thing. If you create this on a public-facing site, you want to know about a site called iegallery.com. iegallery.com, you can go register your pin site for free. That site has multiple millions of users, unique users a month visiting that site looking at pin sites. The IE9, if you go into that menu and you say, go find pin sites, that's going to that site. You want to register your site there if it's a public-facing site. You can't beat the price. And there's a big list of nice names there already, like some of the ones I've shown you today. So definitely keep that in mind. If you want help on any of that, or if you have questions, feel free to go to my blog and contact me. And if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be glad to answer questions, give you my card or whatever. But I expect about, 20 different pin sites out of this conversation from you guys there. I'll have somebody at the door with a contract, and we'll get those things worked out before you can get out. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it.